The tires screech. The car crashes into a snowbank, the impact echoing in the cold night air. Maura Murray's car is wrecked. Alone, in the middle of nowhere, on a remote New Hampshire road. The engine still running. The airbags deployed. But Maura? Gone. The last time anyone saw her was after a witness stopped to check on her. She was shaken but told him she had already called for help. But when the police arrived minutes later, Maura is nowhere to be found. No tracks in the snow. No sign of struggle. Just an abandoned car. What happened in those crucial minutes between the crash and Maura's disappearance? How could a young woman, seemingly fine after a minor accident, vanish without a trace? And what are the terrifying secrets hiding in the hours that followed? It was a bitterly cold February night in 2004 when Maura Murray's life would change forever. A crash on a remote road in New Hampshire, only miles from where she grew up, would mark the beginning of a mystery that still haunts the nation. But what happened in the moments before, during, and after that crash would take everyone by surprise. Just after 7:30 p.m., a passing driver called 911 to report a car off the side of the road. When the first officer arrived, he saw an abandoned vehicle, its airbags deployed and a rag stuffed into the tailpipe. The car wasn't damaged in a way that should have left it undrivable, and there were no signs of major injury. But there was one thing missing: the driver. Maura Murray, the college student who had been behind the wheel, had vanished. She wasn't in the car, she wasn't nearby, and there were no tracks in the snow leading away from the scene. For the police, the case was an enigma. For Maura's family, it was the beginning of a nightmare. They hadn't seen it coming. They hadn't understood what was happening until it was too late. But for everyone else watching, this was the start of an unthinkable mystery. What had happened to Maura Murray? Maura's family immediately began searching the woods near the crash site, but all they found were echoes of confusion and nothing else. No footprints, no signs of a struggle, just an abandoned car in the cold, a car that didn't make sense, and a young woman who seemingly disappeared into thin air. And the authorities? They didn't seem to care. They were told Maura had just run away, as if that explained everything. But Maura wasn't the type to vanish without a trace, no reason to disappear. Yet, she did, leaving behind only a locked car, a missing phone, and countless questions. Where did Maura go? Why was she in this remote area? And how could a young woman, in the prime of her life, simply vanish into thin air? What was even more bizarre was Maura's interaction with the witness. The driver who found her just after the crash had offered to call for help, but Maura assured him she had already called AAA, a red flag, as the area had no cell service at the time. The claim made no sense, and it raised immediate red flags. Was Maura lying? Or was something else going on that no one could understand? It was these little things that didn't add up, these small inconsistencies that left Maura's family and the public with more questions than answers. As the investigation into her disappearance continued, the police weren't able to make sense of anything either. They had a car found in the snow, a young woman missing, and a story that no one could piece together. The clues that did exist were often ignored or dismissed. The police seemed to make assumptions about what happened, assumptions that left out key possibilities and led them to close their minds to the idea of foul play. Was this just an unfortunate accident? Did Maura simply lose her way in the woods? Or was there something darker going on? But that wasn't the most frustrating part for Maura's family. No, the worst part was that the authorities seemed indifferent. Her father, Fred Murray, became the face of the search. He led the efforts himself, combing through the woods, organizing search teams, and working tirelessly to find his daughter. But with every new day, the case grew colder. The leads evaporated. The answers remained elusive. In the weeks that followed, the question lingered. Had Maura wanted to disappear? Had she somehow orchestrated her own vanishing? Was she hiding from something, from someone? But then, a new theory emerged, one that no one had expected. One that would add another layer of darkness to the case. The scent dogs, who had been used in the search, picked up Maura's trail about 100 meters from the car, but then, in an inexplicable twist, they stopped. The scent disappeared, as if she had just vanished. There was no trace, no sign of Maura continuing into the woods, no indication of what had happened to her next. She was just gone. Theories about what happened to Maura flooded in, some more plausible than others. Some believed she had been abducted by someone passing through the area, someone who saw her alone and vulnerable. Others thought that Maura had suffered some kind of mental breakdown, and that she had wandered off into the woods to die, never intending to come back. And then there were those who wondered if someone closer to her was involved, someone who knew Maura and had planned the whole thing. No theory felt complete, though. Each one seemed to have holes in it. Each one left unanswered questions that only added to the confusion. The one thing that was certain was that Maura was gone, and no one had any answers. The Murray family, especially Fred, was left to fight their own battles. They pushed the police to take the case seriously, but it felt like no one was listening. They took matters into their own hands, organizing search parties and using whatever resources they could find to help them investigate. Every day, Fred Murray walked those woods, hoping to find a clue, anything that could lead him to his daughter. But it wasn't just the police they were fighting, it was the online world too. In the days after Maura disappeared, the case exploded on the internet. Online forums were filled with speculation, theories, and armchair detectives trying to piece together the clues. But with every new theory came more misinformation, more distractions, and more false leads. It became almost impossible to tell what was fact and what was fiction. Fred was used to it. The online theories about Maura's disappearance had gotten so out of hand that even his family members couldn't separate fact from fiction anymore. Some people believed she had been part of a larger criminal plot, while others believed she had simply walked into the woods to end her life. The number of conflicting theories was overwhelming, and it only made the family's pain worse. In a world where armchair detectives and internet sleuths could jump in and offer their own opinions, Maura's family had to fight just to maintain control of their own daughter's story. They had to fight to keep her memory intact, to make sure the right narrative was told, one based on the facts, not the wild theories. So they did what they had to do. They created a website, a place where they could publish the real facts, where they could maintain some level of control over the story. Fred and his family were determined that Maura's story would not be forgotten, not lost to the chaos of the internet or the cold indifference of those who couldn't see beyond the mystery. But then, in 2021, something new happened. Human remains were discovered near Loon Mountain in New Hampshire, just 25 miles from where Maura's car was found. The news sent shockwaves through the family. Could this be the breakthrough they had been waiting for? Could this be the moment that everything changed? Fred felt his heart race as the news spread. This was the moment. After everything they'd been through, maybe this time they would finally find Maura, or at least some clue as to where she was. The family couldn't allow themselves to get too hopeful, but the discovery of the remains brought with it the tiniest spark of hope. The bones were sent for testing, and the family waited anxiously, praying for an answer. But when the results came back, they were crushed. The remains didn't belong to Maura. It wasn't her. Another false hope had been shattered. Another lead had led them nowhere. The news hit Fred and the rest of Maura's family hard. After all these years, they had become accustomed to these moments of false hope, but each one still stung like the first. The pain of waiting, the constant uncertainty, it was relentless. Yet, they were never truly ready to give up. Even in the face of these setbacks, Fred and his family continued to fight for Maura's memory. The mystery surrounding her disappearance had become too important, not just for them, but for everyone who had followed her case over the years. Fred's determination hadn't wavered. The years had tested him, pushing him to the brink. But through it all, he continued to hold on to the belief that one day, someone would finally bring the truth to light. It was impossible to let go. Maura had to be found. No matter how long it took, no matter how many years passed. While the Murray family struggled with the emotional toll of these false leads, the world outside continued to watch. Social media, online forums, and true crime communities had turned Maura's case into one of the most discussed unsolved disappearances in recent history. It was a double-edged sword. The attention kept her story alive, but it also brought along an endless stream of theories and false hopes. Armchair detectives had their own ideas about what had happened to Maura, each one more far-fetched than the last. They dug into every detail of her life, her habits, and even her relationships, often drawing conclusions that were as wild as they were speculative. And yet, there was still no answer. No concrete evidence. No trace of Maura to tell the world what had happened that fateful night. With every new theory and every new update, the case seemed to grow more tangled. The more people discussed it, the more convoluted the story became. For Maura's family, it was a nightmare. They had to keep fighting not only for answers, but for control of their daughter's legacy. They didn't want her to be lost in the noise of the internet, to be reduced to nothing more than a theory on a forum. The family's frustration wasn't just with the police or the public, it was also with themselves. How had they not figured this out by now? Had they missed something? Was there a clue they'd overlooked? Every time another year passed without any new information, the question loomed larger in their minds. Was Maura still alive? If so, why had she never reached out? Why had no one come forward with solid information? If she was dead, where was her body? What happened to her? Fred, Julie, and the rest of the Murray family had spent years searching. They went over the details again and again, retracing Maura's steps, going back to the crash site. They explored every possibility, every theory, even those that seemed too far-fetched to believe. But the answers never came. It was as if Maura had been swallowed up by the earth, as if she had vanished without a trace, never to be found again. And yet, her family still held out hope. The one thing that kept the Murray family going was the memory of Maura, the Maura they knew and loved. She was more than a missing person. She was a daughter, a sister, a friend. She was someone who meant the world to them, and they couldn't bear the thought of losing her forever. It was with this unwavering hope that Fred Murray continued his search. Even after all these years, he would not give up. Every lead, every new development, brought with it the possibility that Maura was still out there, waiting to be found. He believed that one day, someone would finally come forward with the truth. Someone would have the key to unlocking the mystery of her disappearance. The online sleuths, the public, and even the media had kept Maura's case alive. But it was the Murray family who had borne the true weight of the search. They had lived with this uncertainty for so long, their lives marked by the unrelenting pain of not knowing what had happened. But even after everything, they still fought on. They still believed that Maura's story wasn't over, that one day they would have an answer. If you have any information about Maura Murray's disappearance, no matter how small, please come forward. Your tip could help bring this case to a close. The Murray family has waited long enough for answers, and so have we. Help us keep this case alive. Don't forget to subscribe to this channel. Turn on your notification, like, comment, and share so that Maura's story doesn't fade into the background.